The soft chime of the restaurant door was a sound Minjun had come to despise. It was a herald of interruption, a signal of some new demand on his time, his money, his patience. Tonight, however, he waited for it. He sat in the shadows of the city's most exclusive dining room, a place so quiet you could hear the whisper of silk against skin. His chair was not one of the restaurant's plush velvet thrones, but a machine of polished chrome and black leather, cold and functional. His legs, once powerful enough to carry the weight of Seoul's underworld on his shoulders, were now still. A single glass of water sat untouched on the white linen before him. His bodyguard, Tae-woo, stood like a statue by a far column, visible but unobtrusive, his eyes scanning everything. Then the chimes sounded. A woman stood framed in the doorway, a vision in a simple but elegant red dress that clung to her generous curves. She was not the type of woman his grandmother's matchmaker usually found. Brittle, high-society daughters with eyes like calculating chips of glass. This woman's face, framed by soft black hair, was open and warm, though her eyes held a flicker of nervous apprehension. And she was not alone. Holding her hand was a small child, a girl of maybe 6 or 7, dressed in a confection of light pink. The girl's eyes were wide, taking in the cavernous, dimly lit room.
민윤의 Steelzeitend.
A child. The matchmaker had failed to mention a child. His first instinct was to give Tae-woo the almost imperceptible signal to end this farce before it began. He would pay for the woman's time, for her wasted evening, and send her on her way. His life had no room for complications, and a child was the greatest complication of all. He watched as the woman, Chloe, scanned the room. Her eyes met his, and for a moment they held. There was no pity in her gaze, only a quiet, searching curiosity. Then she looked at his wheelchair, and her expression did not change. It was this simple lack of a reaction, that stayed his hand. Welcome to our channel. If you enjoy stories about unexpected connections and love that defies all odds, be sure to subscribe. Now, let us get back to the story. Minjun had agreed to this meeting for one reason only, his grandmother. She was the only person on earth whose requests he could not deny. After the accident that had shattered his spine, she had become obsessed with his future. "You have built a kingdom of ice, Minjun," she had told him, her voice thin but her will as strong as steel. "You need warmth, a wife, a family, someone to see the man, not the throne." He had scoffed at the idea. The man he was before the accident was gone. What remained was this, a brain, a will, and a body that had betrayed him. He ran his empire with ruthless efficiency from this chair, his mind sharper and colder than ever before. Love was a liability he could not afford, a weakness his enemies would exploit without a moment's hesitation. The world he inhabited was one of shadows and whispers, of brutal loyalty and swift retribution. It was no place for a wife, and certainly no place for the warmth his grandmother dreamed of. Yet he had promised. One date. He would endure one evening of pointless conversation with a stranger to satisfy the old woman's heart. He had assumed it would be another pale, thin woman who would stare at his chair with a mixture of fear and avarice, calculating the value of his assets against the inconvenience of his condition. He had not been prepared for Chloe. He had not been prepared for the quiet dignity with which she guided her daughter, Lily, to his table. "Mr. Kong," she asked, her voice soft. He gave a curt nod.
I'm Chloe.
"And this is my daughter, Lily." Lily peeked out from behind her mother's dress. "Hello," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the wheels of his chair. "Your chair is very shiny." Chloe's cheeks flushed slightly. "Lily, that's not polite," but Minjun found himself answering the child directly. "It is," he said, his voice rusty from disuse in this kind of gentle conversation. "Chrome needs to be polished or it dulls." Chloe settled her daughter into a chair, placing a small coloring book and a few crayons on the table before her. Lily immediately became absorbed, her small hand gripping a crayon as she began to draw. A small, intricately carved wooden bird sat beside the coloring book, its smooth, worn surface catching the candlelight. The silence that fell between them was heavy. The waiter, who had been hovering nervously, approached. Minjun ordered for them without consulting her, choosing the chef's most delicate and expensive offerings, a subtle test of her poise. Chloe simply inclined her head in thanks, unruffled. "My grandmother believes in arranged meetings," he stated, his tone flat. It was not an apology, but a simple declaration of fact. "So does my friend who set this up," Chloe replied, her hands resting calmly in her lap. "She thinks I need to get out more, and you bring your daughter on your dates?" The question was deliberately pointed, a scalpel intended to find a weakness. He expected defensiveness, a flustered explanation. He did not expect her calm, level gaze. "My babysitter canceled at the last minute," she said simply. "It was either bring Lily or stay home." "I don't break my promises," her words echoed his own code, his own reason for being here. He found the parallel irritating. He watched her for a long moment, this woman who wore her motherhood as easily as she wore her red dress. There was no shame in her, no apology. She was a single mother, a fact she presented as plainly as the color of her eyes. "What is it that you do, Chloe?" he asked, changing tactics. "I'm a librarian," she answered. "At the city's main branch. The children's section, of course. A librarian. A caretaker of stories and children." It was so perfectly, predictably ordinary that it almost felt like a costume. Yet, as she spoke about her work, about the joy of seeing a child discover a book they loved, a genuine light entered her eyes. Lily looked up from her drawing. "Mommy reads the best stories. She can do all the voices." Chloe smiled at her daughter, a private, loving gesture that seemed to create a bubble of warmth around their side of the table. Minjun felt like an observer from a cold, distant planet, watching a species he did not understand. He was a man who dealt in ledgers of debt and violence, not picture books and funny voices. Their food arrived on silent feet, an elaborate display of culinary art. Lily gasped with delight at the tiny, sculpted vegetables. As they ate, Minjun continued his interrogation, his questions growing more personal. He asked about her past, about Lily's father. He was searching for the cracks, the desperation he was so accustomed to seeing in people. "He left a long time ago," Chloe said, her voice even. There was no bitterness, only a quiet resignation. "It's just been us for a while now. We manage." She did not elaborate. She did not complain or fish for sympathy. She simply stated her reality. Her strength was not a performance. It was a foundation, solid and deep. As she spoke, a man rose from a table across the room. He was large, dressed in a suit that was too tight and too shiny, his face florid and coarse. He moved with a predator swagger, his eyes fixed on their table. Tae-woo, ever vigilant, shifted his weight, his hand moving subtly inside his jacket. Minjun saw the movement and gave a nearly invisible shake of his head.
"Wait."
The man stopped beside Chloe, his shadow falling over them. Well, Chloe," he said, his voice a low, greasy purr. "Fancy seeing you here. You're living it up, I see." Chloe's posture stiffened, but her face remained a mask of composure. "Mr. Petrov," she said, her voice low and firm. "This is not the time." "Oh, I think it is," Petrov sneered, his eyes flicking dismissively over Minjun and his wheelchair. "You're 2 weeks late. I'm a patient man, but my patience has a price tag." A very high 1-inch Lily looked up, her crayon frozen over the page, her eyes wide with fear. She sensed the menace in the man's voice, the cold threat that had invaded their small circle of light. Minjun watched, his own fork stilled, his entire being focused on the woman in the red dress. He wanted to see what she was made of. Chloe placed a calming hand on Lily's shoulder, a silent gesture of protection. She did not look at Minjun or seek his help. Her focus was entirely on the man looming over them. "I told you I would have the money at the end of the month," she said, her voice betraying no fear, only a weary resolve. "I will not have this conversation in front of my daughter." Petrov let out a short, ugly laugh. "Your daughter? You should have thought of her before you got in over your head. The clock is ticking, Chloe. And when it stops, things get unpleasant." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Maybe your new friend here can help you out. He looks like he has deep pockets, even if he can't stand up on his own 2 feet." The insult was crude, designed to humiliate both of them. Minjun's face remained impassive, but a dangerous stillness settled over him. He could have Tae-woo remove this man from the earth with a single phone call. But he remained silent, watching Chloe. This was her battle, and her response would tell him everything he needed to know. Chloe slowly rose from her chair, her 5'6" frame seeming to grow in stature. She positioned herself slightly in front of Lily, a living shield. "You will leave this table now," she commanded. It was not a request. The warmth was gone from her voice, replaced by cold, hard steel. "I will meet you on the 1st of the month, as we agreed. But you will not threaten me, and you will not speak to me this way in front of my child ever again." For a moment, Petrov seemed taken aback by her sheer, unyielding force of will. He had expected tears, pleading. He had not expected this quiet, unbreakable defiance. He glanced at Minjun, who met his gaze with an unnerving emptiness, an abyss of cold disinterest that was somehow more threatening than open anger. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Petrov's face. He straightened up, adjusting his suit. "The 1st of the month," he snarled, trying to regain his footing. "Don't be late," and with that, he turned and strode out of the restaurant, leaving a trail of poison in the air. The rest of the meal was a quiet affair. The mood had been irrevocably broken. Lily, sensing the tension, had stopped coloring and now leaned against her mother's side, her small hand clutching the wooden bird. Chloe ate little, her composure a thin veneer over the turmoil beneath. Minjun found he had no more questions for her. He had seen her character laid bare, not by his probing, but by the raw, ugly pressure of the real world. He had seen her courage, a quality he respected above all others. It was not the loud, performative bravery of his own men, but something quieter, deeper. It was the courage of a mother protecting her young. When the check came, he paid it without a word. As they prepared to leave, he spoke. "I will have my driver take you home." It was a statement, not an offer. Chloe hesitated. "That's not necessary." "We can take a cab. It is necessary," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Taewoo was already moving, heading out to bring the car around. They exited into the cool night air and descended into the echoing concrete expanse of the underground parking garage. The air was thick with the smell of exhaust and damp cement. Lily's footsteps, small and quick, echoed beside the soft whir of Minjun's motorized chair. As they rounded a concrete pillar, two figures stepped out of the shadows, blocking their path. It was Petrov and one of his heavies. A cruel smile spread across Petrov's face. "Leaving so soon? I thought we should finish our conversation." Chloe instinctively pulled Lily behind her. "I have nothing more to say to you." "That's a shame," Petrov said, taking a menacing step forward. "Because I do." Just then, the silent, black gleam of a sedan slid around the corner, its headlights cutting through the gloom and pinning the men in their beams. The car stopped. Taewoo emerged from the driver's side, his movements economical and deadly. The passenger door opened, and Minjun looked out from the seat, his chair now folded in the back. His face, illuminated by the dashboard lights, was terrifyingly calm. "Mr. Petrov," he said, his voice soft, yet it carried across the concrete with chilling clarity. "You have made a grave error in judgment." Petrov froze, his bravado vanishing like smoke. He recognized the car. He recognized the tone of voice. He had heard stories about the man who ran the city from a wheelchair, the man they called the Ghost King because his enemies simply disappeared. He had never imagined this was him. I didn't know she was with you," he stammered, taking a step back. "She is not with me," Minjun said, his voice dropping even lower. "She is with her daughter. And you chose to frighten a child. This is an offense that requires a significant correction." He did not raise his voice. He did not issue a threat. He merely stated a fact, as if discussing the weather. But in that calm statement, Petrov heard the sound of his own ruin. He heard the closing of doors, the freezing of accounts, the erasure of his entire existence. Fear, cold and absolute, seized him. He turned and fled, his heavy stumbling after him, their footsteps echoing in the sudden, profound silence. The only sounds left were the hum of the car's engine and Lily's quiet, sleepy breathing. Chloe stared at the empty space where the men had been, then back at Minjun. The sheer, effortless power he had just displayed was more frightening than Petrov's crude threats. She drew a shaky breath. Taewoo held the rear door open for her and Lily. Numbly, she guided her daughter into the plush leather interior before getting in herself. The drive to her small apartment building was silent. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows. Lily fell asleep in her mother's arms, her small body finally relaxing, the wooden bird held loosely in her hand. Chloe watched the passing streets, her mind racing. Who was this man? This was no ordinary businessman. This was a man who moved in a world of profound danger, a world she had only just brushed against. When the car pulled up to her curb, she turned to him in the dim light. "Thank you," she said, the words feeling inadequate. He gave a slight nod, his eyes on the sleeping child.
He will not bother you again, she had to ask.
The question was a knot in her throat. "Who are you, Minjun?" He was silent for a long moment, his gaze unreadable. He did not look at her, but at Lily. "She is safe," he said finally. That is all that matters tonight. It was not an answer, but it was a crack in the ice. It was the first time he had expressed something that sounded like genuine concern, a feeling that went beyond power or control. It was a moment of quiet, shared humanity in the dark of the car. He did not leave. After she had carried a sleeping Lily upstairs and tucked her into bed, she came back down to find the black car still waiting. Minjun was looking out the window, his profile a stark silhouette against the streetlights. He motioned for her to get back in. "There is something you need to know," he said, and the tone of his voice told her this was the real reason for the entire evening. This was the part of the story that had been kept in shadow. "The accident that put me in this chair," he began, his voice low and measured. "It was 2 years ago. A head-on collision on the Han River Bridge. The other driver was intoxicated. He did not survive." Chloe listened, unsure where this was going. She felt a strange, cold premonition creep over her. "The police report listed his name as Daniel Cho," Minjun continued, and the name struck Chloe like a physical blow. Daniel, her husband, the man who had walked out on her and Lily 3 years before that, disappearing into a world of debt and addiction. He died," she whispered. The news was a distant shock, an echo from a life she had long since buried. "Yes," Minjun said. "He died at the scene. He left behind a mountain of debt to dangerous people. People like Petrov." Here is the part of the story nobody saw coming. Here is the truth that recontextualized everything. "For the past 2 years," Minjun said, his gaze finally meeting hers, direct and heavy with unspoken weight, "I have been managing those debts. Quietly. I have also been making anonymous contributions to a fund for his victims. The primary beneficiary of that fund is his daughter." Chloe stared at him, her mind struggling to connect the pieces. The occasional, mysterious deposits into her account that she could never trace. The way certain bills just seemed to get paid. The sudden easing of a financial pressure that had been choking her for years. It was him. It had always been him. "Why?" she breathed. "It was my responsibility," he said simply. "I was the other half of the equation." His life ended, but the consequences of his actions remained. I could not walk away from them. The blind date, she realized, was no accident. His grandmother had arranged it, yes, but he had chosen her name from the list. It was a penance. It was a way for him to finally see the faces of those he had been helping from the shadows, to confront the human reality of the event that had reshaped his own life. The silence in the car was no longer awkward or tense. It was filled with the weight of a staggering, hidden truth. Chloe looked at this man, this feared, powerful king of a dark world, and she saw something else entirely. She saw a man bound by a code of honor so rigid, so absolute, that it had compelled him to secretly care for the family of the man who had, in a way, destroyed him. His paralysis was not the only prison he inhabited. He was also captive to this profound, unseen responsibility. "So you can understand," he said, misinterpreting her silence as fear or revulsion, "that my world is not a safe place. I will clear your debt with Petrov permanently. I will set up a trust for Lily that will ensure she never wants for anything. You will never have to see me again. You and your daughter will be safe." He was offering her an escape, a clean break, a transactional end to their strange, tangled connection. He was trying to protect her by pushing her away. Chloe thought of the quiet dignity he had shown all night, the way he had watched her, the way he had spoken to her daughter about his own chair without a trace of self-pity. She thought of the absolute, terrifying power he had wielded on her behalf, not for show, but for her protection. She could take his offer. She could accept the money and disappear into a safer, easier life. But she knew it would be a life haunted by the ghost of what could have been. She reached across the space between them and placed her hand gently on his. His hand was cold, but it did not pull away. "No," she said softly. He looked at her, his composure finally cracking, revealing a flicker of raw surprise.
No.
"No charity," she clarified. "No transactional endings." She took a breath, meeting his dark, searching eyes. "Let's have a second date, Minjun. A real one.
No bodyguards. No secrets.
Just you and me. We can go to the library. I'll even show you the children's section." A long moment passed. A dozen emotions warred in his eyes. Disbelief, hesitation, and something else, something that looked fragile and hopeful. He had offered her a kingdom's ransom to leave, and she had countered by offering him a quiet hour amongst picture books. It was an act of grace he did not expect, and did not believe he deserved. Slowly, he turned his hand over and closed his fingers around hers. "I would like that," he said, and his voice was no longer the voice of a king, but of a man. 6 months later, the autumn wind was crisp and cool, carrying the scent of roasting chestnuts from a nearby vendor. In a wide, green park overlooking the river, a bright pink kite danced and swooped against the brilliant blue sky. At the other end of the string, Lily laughed with pure delight, her small face tilted upwards. A few feet away, sitting on a bench, Chloe watched her, a soft smile on her face. Beside her, Minjun sat in his chair, his gaze also on the girl and her kite. The tension that had once radiated from him was gone, replaced by a quiet peace. He looked different in the sunlight, younger. The harsh lines around his eyes and mouth had softened. He was no longer just a king in the shadows. He was a man in a park on a sunny afternoon. In his hand, he held the small, carved wooden bird. Lily had given it to him on their second date, at the library. "To keep you safe," she had whispered, pressing it into his palm. He had never let it go. It was a talisman, a reminder of the unexpected warmth that had entered his frozen world. He turned his head and looked at Chloe, and she met his gaze. No words were needed. The connection between them was a quiet, steady current, built not on grand gestures or passionate declarations, but on shared moments like this: the sight of a laughing child, the warmth of the sun, the comfortable silence between two people who had found each other across an impossible divide. His life was still dangerous, and her life was still complicated, but together, they had found a space of calm, a small, protected kingdom of their own. He held up the wooden bird, its smooth form nestled in his scarred, powerful hand. Chloe reached out and placed her hand over his, her fingers covering the bird and his own. It was a promise, a beginning. He had thought his life was over that day on the bridge, but he was wrong. It was just waiting for the right person to show him how to begin again. What do you think is the true measure of a person's strength? Let me know in the comments below. I read every one. Remember to like this video and subscribe for more stories that touch the heart. We will see you in the next one.